Welcome to this special introduction to 1st and 2nd Kings. Today we're going to unpack some key people, major events, important themes that we read along through here and explore why these two books matter to us today. Before we jump in, I want to hear from you. So do me a favor, leave a comment and share maybe a favorite person or event from these books that stands out to you. Now, to start off, let's look at some key people in this book. First off, of course, we have King Solomon, who's known for his unmatched wisdom, his immense wealth. He builds Israel's first temple. Although he's initially faithful to God, his heart later turned to idolatry, which laid the groundwork for Israel's division. Next, we have his son, Rehoboam, and this is the person who was really harsh in his leadership to Israel. It led to their splitting into two different kingdoms. Rehoboam's lack of compassion and wisdom fractured the unity of Israel. Then we have Jeroboam, the first king of divided northern Israel. He's infamous for setting up golden calves as false gods. Now, his actions introduced this long-standing idolatry that's continually referenced throughout these two books as the benchmark of evil in subsequent generations. Then there's the prophet Elijah. He's a courageous prophet. He confronts the wickedness of King Ahab and Jezebel. And his dramatic showdown with Baal's prophets at Mount Carmel emphasized Yahweh's power over all things. Yet his personal struggles illustrate how even strong leaders need God's comfort and God's strength. Next, we have King Ahab. King Ahab is one of the most wicked kings. He's married to Jezebel. And under his reign, worship of Baal flourished a lot. It greatly provoked God's judgment among the nation there. His life warns us of the devastation and the consequences when leaders promote evil. Then there's his wife, Jezebel, Queen Jezebel, and she's notorious for promoting this Baal worship that Ahab adhered to, and she violently opposes God's prophets. She symbolizes here destructive influence, this spiritual rebellion, reminding us today of the critical need that we have to guard our hearts against spiritual compromise. At the end of 1 Kings into 2 Kings, we have the successor of Elijah. Is Elisha. It's granted a double portion of Elijah's spirit. He has numerous miracles that take place, raising people from the dead, multiplying resources. And all of these things highlight God's continued presence and power among his people. Let's look next at the Shunammite woman known for her hospitality to the prophet Elisha, receiving a miraculous son who later died but was raised back to life. Now, her story showcases deep faith, hospitality, God's personal care, and powerful miracles for those who honor him. Next is King Hezekiah. He's a righteous king of Judah who trusted God during Assyria's siege on the nation. This led to a miraculous deliverance from that. Now, his reforms and spiritual leadership serve as a very powerful example of faithful leadership and God's faithfulness back to us, because we wholeheartedly follow him. And then there's Josiah, this young king who started his reign at 8 years old. He is known for rediscovering the law and leading national reform all throughout Judah. Let's briefly now summarize the overview of these two books. The books of 1st and 2nd Kings explain Israel's monarchy through a theological lens. Here we evaluate these kings based on their adherence to God's law. They reveal that disobedience ultimately brought judgment, yet God preserved hope through the continuation of David's lineage, pointing towards Christ. That's an important thing to know as we read here. Now, in terms of historical events that take place, Kings details the glory and the subsequent decline of Israel under this monarchy that we see. Starting from Solomon's peaceful reign and the temple's construction, it moves through the division of the kingdom and the rise of prophetic voices that we've talked about earlier here. Israel eventually falls to Assyria. Babylon takes over Judah. And despite all of this, God's enduring promises still remain as we read on here. Now let's take a closer look at the authorship, the date, and the title of this book here. Now, Jewish tradition says that Jeremiah was the one who wrote this, but the author really remains uncertain. It's likely written during the time after the Babylonian exile around 560 BC or so. Now, 1st and 2nd Kings is influenced a lot by the book of Deuteronomy. It really emphasizes obedience, covenant faithfulness, and divine judgment. Now, internal evidence also points toward editorial activity during the Persian period, which is about 540 to 330 BC, and this reflects historical developments well after the exile. This would indicate to us that layers of editing and theological reflection took place over time. Next, let's explore some specific key events that define these books. First of all, we see Solomon's wisdom in the temple construction in 1 Kings 1 through 11. Israel's golden age here is marked by unmatched prosperity and spiritual devotion, yet ends in compromise. Solomon's foreign marriages introduced idolatry, which laid the seeds for division. Next is the kingdom divides, 1 Kings 12 through 16. Rehoboam's harshness splits Israel. Jeroboam introduces lasting idolatry through generations, and this division profoundly impacts Israel's identity and future. Next, we're going to see Elijah's prophetic ministry in 1 Kings 17 through 2 Kings chapter 1. He challenges idolatry. There's miracles that demonstrate God's power. His battles against Ahab and Jezebel reveal deep spiritual warfare. And then his successor, Elisha, and his miracles in 2 Kings 2 through 10. The double portion of his miracle manifests God's power, judgment, and provision here. Elisha significantly impacts Israel's spiritual direction during this time frame here. Next, there's political turmoil and exile of the northern kingdom, Israel. That's in 2 Kings 11 through 17. Israel's conquered by Assyria due to relentless idolatry. And this tragic fall here highlights a very severe consequence of persistent disobedience. And then we have Hezekiah's revival in 2 Kings 18 through 20. Spiritual renewal leads to Judah's miraculous deliverance from Assyria. Hezekiah's faithful leadership temporarily restores Judah's hope. And then we see Josiah's reform efforts in 2 Kings 21 through 23. The rediscovery of the law sparks revival, but it's short-lived due to deep-rooted sin. Josiah's passion for purity briefly paused Judah's spiritual decline. And then the fall of Jerusalem in 2 Kings 24 through 25. Judah's persistent disobedience results in exile to Babylon, very sadly. This exile became a defining moment for Israel's identity and their faith moving forward. Now let's take a look at the historical and literary context here. Historically, Kings addresses Israel's devastating defeats, their exile that takes place, and these events really challenge Israel's understanding of God's sovereignty and his faithfulness. The authors wrote to encourage faithfulness despite profound national trauma that's happened here. And this all underscores God's control amidst human failure that takes place. Now, from a literary context, the book of 1st and 2nd Kings employs here historical narrative with theological insights. It's structured around kings and their reigns. It evaluates each king by their adherence to God's covenant. So the narrative's careful construction aims to instruct readers on a spiritual leadership here that takes place and the consequences of disobedience. This blends history with theology. Now let's explore some major themes embedded through these two books. The first major theme is this, that it emphasizes Yahweh is the only true God. This means that he commanded exclusive worship from his people. Now the next theme here, number 2, is generational impacts. Obedience and wholehearted devotion have lasting generational impacts. They shape both individuals and nations here. And thirdly, idolatry inevitably leads to moral decay. I mean, this illustrates the deep connection here between spiritual devotion and practical holiness in our lives. Now let's turn our eyes to a supernatural worldview as we read these two books. Throughout 1st and 2nd Kings, we're going to encounter the unseen spiritual conflict behind Israel's history. False gods worshipped in Israel here were more than just idols. They represented demonic spiritual entities influencing surrounding nations, eventually Israel, and they sought to disrupt God's redemptive plan. These rebellious spiritual powers here actively opposed Israel in an aim to prevent the arrival of the coming Messiah, Jesus. The battle here simply wasn't political. It was spiritual warfare on a cosmic level, because the return and the embrace of these false gods by Israel symbolized a surrender here to spiritual forces opposed to God. Now, understanding this helps us see beyond the physical realm. It helps us to recognize the ongoing spiritual conflicts and the importance of unwavering faithfulness to God alone. Now, as we get ready to close all of this out, let's get practical with why this matters to us today. 1st and 2nd Kings reminds us that our choices, they carry generational significance. Just as Israel's compromise throughout all the generations impacted them, our devotion or our compromise deeply shapes our personal and our generational futures here. Practically, it urges us to examine our hearts, to reject hidden idols, to remain fully and faithfully committed to God, knowing that today's choices, they influence tomorrow's outcome and legacy. So in closing, I know that there's a lot of information here to grasp, but it is essential as we read through this to apply the truths of God's word to our lives today. So after watching this video, as you read through these two books, what stands out to you? What person or event really grips your heart the most? Leave it in a comment below. Do me a favor as well. Would you subscribe to this channel? If you don't, send this video to a friend who you know might impact their life, and blessings as you read these two books.